Most investors think passive income means money comes into your bank account and you don't have to do any work. But the truth is no property is 100% hands off, especially in real estate. So we're trying to figure out who's actually doing most of the work. So in this video, I'm going to share what I've learned in terms of residential real estate versus commercial real estate and the key levels of ownership to see which one is more passive compared to the other. I'm going to show how one type of property can completely run on autopilot while the other completely drains your energy. So let's get into it. So let's first just start with defining passive income. So passive income is the income you get from your investments or assets rather than from your own labor. So when we own property, you can actually get income from just owning the asset. So someone's going to actually pay you to live in it or to use the house or the commercial property that you own. And so that's passive income. You can also have an active income where you actually put your own labor to force and add value to the property, where you can, do a renovation for a week and increase the property by $100,000. So that's when you use your own labor to force income onto a property. And you can also have passive income from the actual rent and then passive income from the capital growth. So you don't have to put any labor into the property, and the property, because of the market, can grow, 100,000, 200,000 in 20%, 30% in a year. So that's where the actual value of the property increases. And from not you having to do any work, it's just passive capital gains, but you don't actually realize those gains until you sell the property. But you can realize the gains from the rental income. And so not all income is 100% passive and effort-free. It's more of a scale of how passive is this income. Are you just putting 1 hour a week into generating the income, or are you putting 40 hours a week to generate the income? So some investments demand more time and effort, and that's why there's a scale of how passive income is. And so what we're going to analyze is who actually does the work. We're going to compare residential properties to commercial properties, see which sort of property and type of asset actually requires more work and which one actually is less passive or more passive compared to the other. Because ultimately we're investing to kind of get a return on our time and a return on our money, so we can have more money to have more time with our family. We don't want to be investing in large assets and then having to spend all our time maintaining and managing them. We kind of want to invest in these assets so they generate an income for us, so we can spend more time with other people and do things we really want to do. Ultimately, that's why we're investing. So when it comes to the actual costs of owning a property, in residential you have a large amount of costs, whereas in commercial property a lot of the costs are actually paid by the tenant. So in residential you're paying the loan, the property management. When the property goes vacant, you got to pay money to advertise it. You got council, water rates, land tax, insurance, repairs, body corporates, fit outs, utilities. All those things, when you own a residential property, they're paid by the investor. So you collect the rent from the tenant, and then you got to pay all these expenses. Whereas in commercial property, because the business is actually running out of the property, the tenant pays for a lot of the expenses. So the investor's only paying for the loan, the property management, and if the property goes vacant, to re-tenant the property. So in commercial property, all those other expenses that the residential people have to pay, you don't have to pay. They're paid by the tenant. So that's going to save you a lot of time in terms of all the bills that you're going to have to pay, all the managing with the property manager to get things fixed, all that time suck and time drain that you're going to be spending in residential property. When you own those sorts of properties, you don't have to spend commercial because the tenant is doing all that work for you. So you can already see there's a huge discrepancy in the amount of time and the amount of money that actually gets spent up front and ongoing when you own a residential property compared to a commercial property. And if we look at the lease length, in residential, you've got shorter lease lengths, so 6 to 12 months. You're going to be dealing with frequent turnovers. That's where you're going to have to actually get the property manager to re-tenant the property, and you're going to be able to constantly in communication with them to make sure the property is being tenanted. Whereas in commercial property, you can have longer leases, so 3 to 10 plus years. I've seen one commercial property that was a childcare centre that had a 45-year lease. So you're not going to be having to deal with the property managers constantly to get the property re-tenanted if someone's going to be there for 45 years. It also gives you a lot of, more of a predictable income, less tenant changes, less money having to be spent on re-tenancy, on getting things fixed because the tenant's paying for it all to be fixed as well. So just by having a longer lease length, there's less time that's going to be needed to go towards actually re-tenanting the property, dealing with property managers as well. That's why commercial can kind of be more of a passive income, because you're not having to spend so much time dealing with your tenants. Now, in terms of cash flow, because of the shorter leases, rent can drop quickly, especially if the market changes in residential. Whereas in commercial, you've got those long leases, and often they're actually fixed to annual increase in rent. So it might be a 3% rental increase each year, or something that's linked to inflation. So this predictable income and cash flow means you don't have to spend as much time, in the spreadsheets looking at, what your rent is this week, what it's going to be next week, managing your cash flows. It's a lot more predictable. So it's easy to forecast it going, into the future. Now, in terms of managing the tenant, in residential, obviously we've talked about more tenant turnover. That just means there's more inspections, there's more things that are going to need breaking, there's more repairs and little small details that come up all the time with the property manager that you're going to have to get fixed in residential, where the tenant's asking for this. Property manager's not really going to help you. You got to do it all yourself. And in commercial, lower turnover, the business inside the actual property wants their business to stay alive, so they're going to be investing into their location, making sure it's clean and nice and presentable. There's going to be fewer calls, less headaches, because the tenant is actually looking after the property. If you're in a residential and the person knows they're just going to be there for 6 to 12 months, are they really realistically going to invest heavily into the property, making it look nice, looking after it? Probably not. It's not their home. In commercial, they want to be there for a long time. They want to stay in business, so they're going to invest into making sure they've got a nice property. So really what we're talking about is the difference between investing your time and investing your money. So in commercial property, you're going to be getting a lot better return on your time compared to residential. But obviously it comes up with, you need more money. So you're going to have to put more money up front, but it's going to take less of your time to actually maintain the property. Whereas in residential, you need less money up front, but it's going to require more of your time and effort to actually managing and looking after the property. So there's a cost to benefit to both. And obviously, as I'm starting out, I'm going to be having to invest a bit less money, but it's going to require more time as I'm getting into residential property. But gradually, as I get older, establish myself, I'm going to be wanting to invest more money to get more time back. So that's kind of the difference between residential and commercial. So residential is a bit more safer, especially for new people like myself that are getting into the property market, but it's going to demand more of our time. There's more expenses, there's more management that's going to be involved into making sure the property stays tenanted. Whereas commercial, obviously, you need more knowledge, you need more skills, and you need more money up front. But once it's set up, it can be passive for years. I'd mentioned that I found this childcare centre that's got a 45-year lease. You're not having to be spending a lot of time managing the property if it's got a 45-year lease. And the less time you can spend managing your properties, the more time you can actually spend living and enjoying life and enjoying the fruits of your labour, and actually having a passive income where you're not having to spend all day managing and looking after the property and your investments. You've got more time and more money coming in to enjoy your life. And that's how commercial property can be way more passive than residential property. Now, if you like these sorts of videos, go watch my last video where I compare 4 residential properties compared to 1 commercial property to see which one outperforms the other over 15 years. So go watch that next, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out.